Hello, everyone. I was enjoying myself a little too much tonight. I got the project done and was listening to some YouTube music. One in particularly, Macy Gray, Hands. I'm a huge fan of that song, and a few of our others. So let's get this project started. It was a lengthy project. The Internet Hall of Fame, which I do have listed here, and I have some websites. It took me a couple days to do this. I don't know if anyone else found that to be true, but I did. But it was a very interesting project. So the first one that I started with, 5 events of the Hall of Fame timeline, was the event. Ray Tomlinson invented the email. So it was in 1972. Ray was working on a BBN Technologies, and BBN stands for actually several people's names. But he was working on a project when he discovered email, or the email. He showed it to a colleague and swore him to secrecy, which we do that quite a bit. Ray used an @ sign to create the user @ host format that we're familiar with today. Though the first email was not preserved, he went on to have several tests to be successful. Prior to his death in 2006, so it was just died a year ago, he received over a half a dozen of awards for his brilliance. So thank you, Ray. We really didn't come to the full-blown importance of email until I want to say late 80s, early 90s, but it was around for a while, so that's kind of cool. Next one that I picked for my Internet Hall of Fame timeline was, I went up a little too far there, was the World Wide Web opens to the public. A British man by the name of Tim Berners-Lee. He was working with the late Steve Jobs on the NeXT computer. For those of you that are old enough to remember the NeXT computer, I think only the first generation stayed around on that. He pretty much wrote the roadmap, and I have 2 does in there, he wrote the World Wide Web that we know today. So it's based on some things that we're very familiar with. I did some social media marketing work. So I'm familiar with HTML, URI, and HTTP, which we're all familiar with dealing with websites. Does that sound familiar? By the end of 1990, the first web page was ready for use, but it wasn't launched until August 6, 2091. It's been 25 years since we first were introduced to the web as we know it. So that was pretty amazing. Third one I picked was the MP3. MP3 was a German invention designed by Moving Pictures Expert Group. That's where the whole MPG, it used to be MPEG before it just went to MP3. It was invented by, they were German. Okay, so I'm not going to try to pronounce their names. But the research was led by Karl Heinz. I can say that. They were researching how to compress music. So we kind of know a little bit how to compress music. For those that are old enough like myself, we remember LPs and albums and vinyl and wax. And yeah. So, but the invention took several years. It was in 1994 that the MPG-E2 was developed and published a year later. Whatever happened to the one, 2 really didn't make the cut because 3 was what we know today. So I asked who knows. I do have to say some of these were very lengthy studies. There was a lot of information out there, and I just picked what I felt I could right away and to compress it. But the links are here from things that I did find. Wikipedia was pretty useful, I'd say, in some of this research. By far, I have to say the longest research, the history of the blog reads like a series of, history/timelines. There is nothing, the 2 that I found, it was actually 3, but I only chose to put 2. It literally read like another Internet Hall of Fame timeline. and it was just so much information of step-by-step stuff that sometimes I didn't feel was relevant. I did see that front page played a part in this, but one story, I read a journalist writing about Hurricane Bonnie was the first blog. That was back in 2000, I want to say 4. And if it was Hurricane Bonnie that I'm familiar with, I was living in Jacksonville, Florida at that time, and that hurricane wreaked havoc on Jacksonville in one section of the north end that even to this day I don't think it's fully recovered. So I lived in the South through all those hurricanes, and that's interesting that that was the first story or the first blog that they say. Last one I wrote about because it was I just felt a need to write about her. Darkis Methoni, I might be saying it wrong. I probably am. She's a Kenyan native. She started Open World Ltd. As we know it. She's the CEO and founder of the company, and she started it at 24 years old. Found that to be quite impressive. This company started by building networks for universities and started an open source that developed software for e-government. She did all this in Kenya. Her story, which is found on her website, it's the Lioness of Africa. She was pretty impressive because she started out as a software developer, and just filled in the need. I want to say she brought a form of Unix, or she studied Unix and made it applicable to Africa and made a Africhix subdivision off of Unix, I think, is how she became so great at what she did, and she opened up Africa to the World Wide Web, the internet, all the computer stuff that we know today. So that's my Hall of Fame, my 5 things that I picked off for the Hall of Fame, which I found to be most interesting. And now I'm going to go back to Macy Gray. Going back to Macy to complete my night. And I hope everyone has had a really great Memorial Day. I know that Memorial Day is about those that were lost, coming from a military family times 2. I just hope everyone has a great weekend and a safe one.